I was stunned. I had just returned home from the doctor's office with the most terrible news imaginable, and then I was told even more terrible news. I'm dying. Literally. I have an inoperable, extremely aggressive brain tumor. So I returned home, ready to tell my wife the bad news. When I entered the house, it was quiet. It was quite strange since we have a rather wild 8-year-old girl. She usually hears my car pulling into the garage and greets me when I enter the house. This time, this did not happen. Instead, I saw that my wife, with whom I had lived for 10 years, was standing in the kitchen, waiting for me. "Where is Olivia?" I asked. "My mother's," Anne answered. "Look, there's no easy way to do this, so I'm just going to rip off the bandage. I've been cheating on you and Michael for the last 6 months. He's richer than you and can provide a much better life for Olivia and me. We decided that a clean break was the best option. So, Olivia and I are moving away for a month. Don't try to call or text because I left my phone at my mother's house. She also blocked you on all her social networks and email accounts. The divorce petition is on the table for you to review. Tomorrow they will officially present it to you. There's no point in discussing anything. As I said, Michael is much richer than you. I'm asking for nothing more than my personal belongings and full custody of Olivia. I'm sure the court will allow you to visit her, but soon Michael will become her new father. Let's face it, you'll see her once every couple of weeks, but Michael every day. Very little time will pass, and she will begin to perceive him as her real father, and you as just an acquaintance with whom she sometimes sees." With that, Anne turned, picked up her purse, and headed toward the front door. "I'm dying, and I want to say goodbye to my daughter," I said to her back. "I know this is a shock for you, but you will survive. I'll bring her to visit when we get back," she replied. I realized she thought I was speaking metaphorically, but before I could correct her, she had already closed the door behind her. I was stunned. I thought that the news that was given to me less than an hour ago was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I was given even worse news. Not only was I not given the chance to tell the love of my life that I was dying, but I was not even given the opportunity to say goodbye to my daughter. This is completely unacceptable. So, this is a real war. I called my friend, Jack Slade, who had been my lawyer since I passed the bar exam. My sophomore year of high school, I stopped a couple of guys who were hitting on him. In turn, he helped me with mathematics. Since then, we have become best friends. I told him what happened, and he cleared his schedule for me. We were supposed to meet on Monday at 9 a.m. "Andrew, have you thought about hiring a private investigator to follow them?" "No, I haven't progressed far enough in my thinking to think about it. Honestly, since this is a no-fault state and she says she only wants her personal items, I didn't think it would matter. Besides, they're going away for a whole month, and by the time they return, I'll most likely be dead. I don't even know where they are going." "Well, since you can afford it, without even noticing the money spent, we can at least try to get some information about them. Besides, who knows what you'll find out. I have a really good private investigator that I use, a former military intelligence officer with quite extensive connections." "Great. Plug it in. I don't have a lot of information, but his name is Michael Simpson, and he's a lawyer with the Simpson Law Group. I will also send you photographs and any necessary information about Anne and Olivia if it will help you find them." Okay, he replied. "Now you need to start protecting yourself. Go online and cancel all credit cards issued in your name. Transfer all the money from your joint accounts to accounts in your name only, and then cancel the joint accounts. If we were going to file for divorce, it would be frowned upon, but since there won't be a courtroom trial, it's okay. Additionally, we can use the divorce petition she gave you to show that she didn't want anything out of the divorce anyway. You can take care of all the insurance and retirement accounts after our meeting on Monday. We will discuss this at our meeting." After finishing the phone call, I pulled out a bottle of 12-year-old single malt whiskey that I was saving for a special occasion. Since there were no special occasions in the future, I decided to use it today. I fired up my laptop and started rummaging through my accounts. I paid off and canceled all the credit cards we had, transferred money from our joint checking and savings accounts to my personal checking account, which I kept to buy gifts for Anne. She has a habit of regularly checking our joint account and seeing what I'm buying. For the first couple of years of our life together, I couldn't surprise her with anything. After that, he began to buy her gifts from a personal account to which she does not have access. I spent most of the weekend trying to cut Anne out of my life. I went through the whole house and removed everything that had anything to do with her. I put all the things she left in a pile in the backyard. All our wedding photos, vacation photos, marriage certificate, and everything else related to her were piled up. I filmed everything. Finally, I took her wedding dress out of the closet. I filmed myself cutting it into pieces with a utility knife and then throwing it into a pile. He poured a whole bottle of lighter fluid onto the resulting pile and then threw a lit box of matches onto it. After that, I emptied the safe where we kept all of her expensive jewelry and several certificates of deposit that we used as investments. I collected the CDs, then took all the jewelry that was in the box, as well as everything else she left behind, and put it up for auction on eBay. Anything that didn't sell within the next 10 days would go to pawn shops and stores several states away. On Sunday, I received a text message from a hidden number. The display showed hidden, so I couldn't even track it. It contained a photograph of Anne and Olivia playing on the beach with Michael. For me, it was just another beach in some corner of the world. However, I forwarded the text message to Jack. After forwarding the message, I responded with my own. It contained a link to the cloud storage of my video. I added to the message, "You can take back all the personal belongings that are left in your hands." Monday morning, I met up with Jack and a guy named Gus. He looked serious. We started discussing options. It is clear that the controversial issue was divorce. It was more about what I wanted to happen after my death and how to arrange everything. All in all, I wanted my daughter to be well taken care of. I also didn't want my wife to benefit in any way. We decided to set up trust funds for Olivia. One trust is for her education. I wanted his funds to be used to pay for whatever education she wanted. He would even cover all medical school costs until she received her full medical license. Whatever is left after this will be given to her to start her life and career. Another trust fund was set up where she would have access to everything when she turned 30. The physical assets, cars, house, etc., will be held in trust until she is old enough to use them responsibly. This trust will be managed by my brother so he can live in the house while Olivia grows up. He and his wife rent an apartment in the city, so this will help them. She will get use of my cars when she gets her driver's license. The house will be given to her when she turns 18 and graduates from high school. Another trust was created with Jake's participation to take care of Olivia between my death and her 18th birthday. It was created in case something happened, and Olivia needed additional support. The last problem was that I'd appointed my brother and his wife to be Olivia's guardians if anything happened to Anne. His daughter and my daughter were about the same age and got along very well. I fully assumed that something would happen to Anne, but I didn't want the bailiff to find out about it. "You don't know where they are?" Gus asked. "No." She refused to say where they were going. "The other day I received a message with a photo of them on the beach, but all I can to say it's just some beach somewhere," I answered, taking out the photo and showing it to them. The phone was set as hidden, so the number was not displayed. Plus, Anne left her phone with her mother, so I can't even use the Find My Phone app to try to locate her. Gus looked at the photo for a few minutes and then said, "I think I know where they might be. See the ship in the background? This is a cruise ship that regularly visits the Cayman Islands. At the top right is the corner of the resort complex building. It doesn't have the full logo, but the part that is visible looks like one of the best resorts on the islands. From what you told us about her lover, he appears to be very wealthy. This means that he could take advantage of one of the best resorts. I have a couple of friends who are away on the islands, so I'll send this photo to them and ask them to scour the area around the resort to see if they can spot them. I also have his name and can search online for more information. I must warn you that it won't be cheap." I looked at Jack and said, After signing the power of attorney, send Gus a fee of $20,000. Looking back at Gus, I added, I want to know everything they do and where they go. I want to know who they're dating. Jack said you have a lot of really good contacts. My soon-to-be ex-wife took my daughter out of the country without my permission, and I have no idea who she is talking to. But while I need information, my first priority is my daughter's safety. I understand, he smiled. The rest of the meeting consisted mostly of discussing details and signing various papers. I left Jack a check from one of my new accounts to pay for his services. You know, Jack began, she took your daughter out of the country against your wishes. This could be a case of child abduction by one parent. She also denied you the right to see your daughter before she died. I will prepare a complaint and file it with the district attorney. I think we have a good chance of bringing her to justice when she returns. In addition, she took it not only out of state, but also out of the country. This is already a federal kidnapping case. She could receive significant time in prison. Let's do it, I replied. After this, the meeting ended. The rest of the week was spent preparing my business and all other details for my impending death. I booked hospice for my last week of life based on what the doctor told me about the progression of the cancer. Jack had already dealt with most of my physical and financial assets, but there were still some personal mementos and other small items that I needed to deal with. This was supposed to happen on Thursday evening. Hi, brother. Thank you for coming this evening, I said, letting my brother and his wife into the house. Well, you said it was important. Lindsay is with April and Dave today, Jason replied. Jason is my brother. His wife's name is Kate, and her parents are April and Dave. It is clear that Lindsay is his daughter, my niece. This is more important than you think, I replied. Where are Anne and Olivia? Kate asked, not seeing anyone to greet them. It's just me here today. Anne and Olivia. Well, let's just say they're not at home right now, I managed to say without breaking down. Let me pour you a drink, and then we'll have dinner. After that, we will discuss what I have to tell you. They didn't really want it, but I left them no choice. Jason, seeing me drinking a good single malt scotch and noticing my gloomy mood, took it too. Kate chose Merlot, deciding that a light, fruity white would not suit the discussion later. Not in the mood to cook myself, I ordered Italian food delivered from the best Italian restaurant in town. Yes, there was enough food to feed an entire army, but I'll worry about the rest later. Jason and I drank a glass and headed to the dining room. The dinner came with 2 bottles of matching wine. We carried on light conversation while we ate. It should be mentioned that I hired a waiter to serve the various dishes and keep the wine and water glasses filled. Jason and Kate were somewhat puzzled by this. Perhaps I should talk about some points. Usually I am a very private person, and also I am quite simple. Not simple in the sense of stupid, but in the sense that I don't need much to be happy. You don't need a new luxury car every year. My old truck and 1972 GTO sports car are enough. I don't need to live in a mansion. I like my nice house in a nice area. I don't want to go on exotic vacations all the time. I like my vacation to be calm and quiet. With all this, I simply never show my true wealth. If Anne had ever discussed this with me and said she wanted to go to Italy for a month, I would have done it. She apparently didn't notice that she never needed anything. Olivia goes to private school, receiving the best education, but Anne has never even wondered where the money comes from. I never even told my brother about my true wealth. The truth was that I made some very profitable investments right out of college. My business was also doing much better than I made it out to be. In fact, I didn't like the idea of showing off my wealth to anyone. I once heard a saying, success is relative. The greater the success, the more relatives. This means that the more successful you become, the more relatives bend over backwards to take as much as possible for themselves. I don't need every Tom, Dick, or Harriet hitting on me about some fancy investment opportunity they've come up with. I donated anonymously to causes I thought were worthwhile, but kept a low profile. Accordingly, my wife apparently felt that we were not in the income range she was aiming for. Okay, bro, Jason began after we sat down with refreshments in the living room. I feel like something is happening. What's the matter? I sighed. Okay, first of all, I'm dying. Literally. I'll die in less than a month. I have a very aggressive and inoperable brain tumor. In less than a month, I will be gone. However, there are some things you both need to know. First, I'm currently in the process of setting up several trusts that will take care of Olivia after I die. Most of these trusts will be administered by Jack, my lawyer. One will be controlled by you. This trust is for a home, cars, and other large physical assets. Jack will tell you the details after my will is read. Additionally, I am appointing the two of you as Olivia's guardians until she graduates from high school. Kate let out a loud sob and rushed towards me. She hugged me and began to sob on my shoulder. Jason looked at me with a puzzled expression on his face. He took another sip of whiskey and then asked the question I was expecting. Andy. He was the only one who called me that. I couldn't help but notice that there were several glaring inconsistencies in your words. First of all, you never mentioned Anne, your wife. Second, a spouse typically inherits property upon the death of the other spouse. Third, unless there are any extenuating circumstances, your wife will have sole custody of your daughter upon your death. And finally, where the hell are Anne and Olivia? This is where things get scary, I said, carefully moving Kate away from me. Last Friday, when I returned home, Anne was waiting for me. I was going to tell her the news that the doctor told me that day, but before I had time to say anything, she announced that she was leaving me for someone else. In addition, she said that her new man was taking her and Olivia away for a month so that they could fully rest and allow Olivia to get closer to her new stepfather. I'm filing federal charges against Anne for parental child abduction because she took Olivia out of the country without my permission. With any luck, Anne will spend a lot of time in prison. Therefore, I need both of you to become her guardians. I explained my plans and their responsibilities in detail. We talked until late into the night and discussed my plans and a few minor changes. By then, they had drunk a fair amount of bourbon, and they ended up spending the night in my spare room. One of the changes I thought about was creating another trust fund for Lindsay College. I made a note that I would call Jake on Monday and ask him to add it to the list. The next week moved by like molasses on a particularly cold January day. We scheduled weekly meetings for every Monday morning, unless there was a particularly urgent matter that I needed to be informed about. At night, it was difficult for me to sleep because I was worried about my daughter. How will she react to coming home and finding out that her dad has died? I spent several hours writing a letter to be given to her at the reading of the will, explaining how much I loved her and how sad I was that I had not had the opportunity to say goodbye to her. It was probably petty of me, but I also explained what her mother had done to deprive us of this last chance. Finally, Monday morning arrived. I was back in Jack's conference room. Gus was there too. I didn't like the expression on his face. We started with Jack updating me on the status of my accounts. I informed him that another trust needed to be created for Lindsay. There were no problems with this. When that was done, it was Gus's turn. This is where things started to go wrong. We have some updates, Gus began. First of all, we found them. They really are at this resort. We deployed some forces to follow them and gather information. We also managed to get a lot of information about your wife's lover, Michael Simpson. He is a lawyer in the office where your wife works. I would like to immediately make a reservation that some of the information we collected cannot be used in court. It turned out that Mr. Simpson is a very unpleasant person. He does legitimate work for the company, but he also has some rather dubious friends. He and your wife spent a lot of time with this man while in Cancun. He handed me a photograph of a Latino across the table. His name is Julio Cabrera. He runs a large network of smugglers of illegal substances and weapons, and is also involved in human trafficking. His specialty is delivering young girls to rich men in other countries. This caught my attention. Are you saying that he is going to kidnap and sell my daughter into sexual slavery? We were able to capture fragments of conversations between Mr. Simpson and Mr. Cabrera that indicate this. They even discussed paying Mr. Simpson for his assistance. I was shocked, to put it mildly. Okay, I understand that my wife is a cheater, but I can't believe that she would agree to sell our 8-year-old daughter into the illegal sex trade. We don't think she's aware of this plan. All conversations about this that we recorded took place in her absence. She was either on the dance floor with another man, in the bathroom, or entertaining your daughter away from Mr. Simpson. Then what happens when she disappears? Surely she will cause a scandal and try to seek help from the authorities, I asked. We envision 2 scenarios for the development of events. The first scenario is that your daughter will be kidnapped at the end of the trip, leaving your wife with little time to react. Yes, she can file a complaint with the authorities, but she won't have time to do anything else before she has to leave. The second scenario is if she manages to draw too much attention to them. In this case, she will also disappear and end up either as a sex slave for a rich man in another country, or she will be sent to a brothel somewhere in South America. Anne, what have you gotten yourself into? I thought to myself. There is one more thing that we discovered. Perhaps this will be useful for you and my team. Your wife and Mr. Simpson went out clubbing almost every night, leaving Olivia alone in the room. My operatives are interested in the fact that your wife leaves a young girl alone for several hours at night. Posing as resort employees, 2 of them entered the room after your wife and Mr. Simpson had left and found your daughter fast asleep. It was not possible to wake her. They also found a bottle of sleeping pills in the bathroom and the remains of crushed pills in a cup next to your daughter's bed. We believe your wife is giving her daughter sleeping pills to help her sleep while she and Mr. Simpson have fun at night. That's all. The straw that broke the camel's back. I have to protect my daughter at all costs, and fuck that bitch. Jack, would you please leave the conference room and spend the next half hour giving Gus another $50,000 deposit? I asked. A look of concern appeared on Jake's face, but he stood up and left. So, new priorities. First, get my daughter out of there and bring her to my home. Are you able to do this? I asked. Undoubtedly. As soon as we knew what was happening, we took measures for just such a scenario. I assumed that this would be your reaction. Keep an eye on my wife and her lover. I have a feeling that after Olivia disappears, everything will go to hell. The operatives who are watching your wife will not participate in the extraction operation. They will remain in place until your wife returns to the U.S. Fine. And one last thing. Can you prepare another evacuation team in case something really bad happens to my wife? She's a cheater, sure, but I still have some feelings for her. I have my own punishment in mind for her, but I don't want her to end up as a slave or an easy woman in a South American brothel. Yes, Gus smiled. I have several friends who can get her out of almost anywhere. I will mobilize and prepare them. What about her lover? I looked Gus straight in the eye. My answer was as cold as liquid nitrogen. He is not your concern. Moreover, I will not pay you a penny for the help that you provide him. If he gets into trouble and you rescue him and my wife, I will deduct all the costs associated with his recovery from whatever you charge me for retrieving my wife. Gus laughed out loud. I think we have a complete understanding, Mr. Coleman. Michael and I entered the room around 3 o'clock in the morning. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, we went to dinner with Olivia. Returning to the room, we hung out a little and watched some stupid movie. When the movie ended, I made Olivia change into her pajamas, brush her teeth, then drink a glass of water before putting her to bed. 15 minutes later, the sleeping pills I added to the water took effect, and she passed out. I spent half an hour putting on my club dress and putting on my evening makeup. Mikhail and I went down to the club to have some fun. That evening, Julio joined us again. He is a friend of Mikhail's, whom I was introduced to when we arrived in Cancun. Personally, I thought he was a little arrogant, but Michael emphasized that he was a big client and I should be polite to him. The next few hours were a lot of fun. I danced with Michael several times. Michael also invited me to dance some tunes with Julio and a few other men. When I returned to the table, my drink was always refilled. I wasn't worried about anything being mixed into the drink because Michael was always nearby. "Just let me check on Olivia and I'll be right back," I said, kissing my lover. Michael went left into the master bedroom, and I turned right to look into Olivia's room. As expected, I saw a tuft of blonde hair peeking out from under the blanket. Under the sheet and blanket, the outline of her body could be seen. Satisfied that she did not wake up while sedated, I returned to the bedroom and over the next few hours continued to express my gratitude to Michael for this vacation. The next morning, I woke up late. Before that, there was a long day of sightseeing, a beach holiday with Olivia, and an even longer night of partying and lovemaking with Michael. I trudged into the bathroom to do my morning ritual. After that, I put on my robe and went to the kitchen to make myself some coffee. I was surprised that Olivia doesn't watch cartoons yet. Of course, I gave her sleeping pills yesterday, but she should have woken up by now. After drinking my first cup of coffee, I went to check on my daughter. Her room was much brighter than when I looked in there last night. In this light, I noticed several oddities. Firstly, her hair, although still blonde, was not the same shade as Olivia's. Secondly, it seemed like there weren't enough pillows on the bed. After looking at the scene in front of me for a few minutes, I also noticed that there was no regular rise and fall of the blanket to indicate breathing. My first thought was that maybe my daughter had overdosed and died that night. I panicked. She screamed, calling Michael for help, and ran into the room to check on her daughter's condition. My initial panic turned into my worst nightmare as I yanked the covers off the motionless figure on the bed. I looked in horror at the motionless head of a mannequin in a blonde wig and at the huddled pillows simulating a body, hiding under the blanket. "Olivia!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. As has become common over the past week, I began to emerge from sleep a little foggy. Before this, I usually woke up quickly. It seemed that after my mother and I arrived in Cancun, I no longer woke up the way I usually did. I tried to talk to my mom and that shady guy she seems to be sleeping with, but they just brushed me off, saying that the tropical climate was affecting me. This time, everything was a little different. Instead of slowly whacking up in a nice, soft bed, I felt that the bed was not so soft, after all. In addition, I felt a noticeable movement in the environment. Usually, when you wake up in a hotel room, there is no movement around you. At the same time, I felt shocks, shudders, and vibrations from the bed. When I opened my eyes, it became clear that I was not in my hotel bedroom. It only took a few seconds to realize that I was on an airplane. In a blind panic, I jumped up and sat down. A beautiful young woman, probably in her 20s, looked at me and smiled reassuringly. She stood up from her seat and slowly walked towards me. "Everything is all right, my dear. You're safe now," she said soothingly. "What do you have in mind?" I was on holiday with my mother and was already safe. She frowned for a moment, then began again. "No, baby, you weren't safe there. Your mother got involved with a lot of bad people. I don't think she realized it, but you were in great danger. My friends and I pulled you out of there, and now you are on the way to your father." "To Dad?" I asked. "Yes, dear. He hired us to save you." "How do I know that you are telling me the truth? How do I know that you are not lying to me and that you are not actually kidnapping me?" She had the nerve to laugh at me. "Well, I think you have no way of knowing this. I guess your only option is to wait and see what happens next." With that, she walked to the front of the plane and returned a few minutes later with a tray containing scrambled eggs, bacon, and waffles. There was also a large glass of orange juice. By this point, I was very hungry and ate everything instantly. I only remembered later that there might be prohibited substances there. Fortunately, nothing bad happened after that. I began to calm down, because it seemed to me that they did not want to do anything bad to me. A few hours later, we landed at the airport. From the plane, all airports look the same, but I noticed that there are a few words in English. We taxied into a private hangar. When I went down the steps, I saw many familiar signs indicating that we were in the USA. There was a black Chevy Suburban parked outside the hangar, which we approached. They loaded me into the back seat, and we drove off. As soon as we left the airport gates, I saw familiar signs that told me that we had indeed returned to the city in which I live. About 40 minutes passed, and I saw that we were approaching my father's house. What the fuck, Julio? I heard Mikhail's voice on the phone. Olivia has disappeared. I assumed he was contacting Julio to help find Olivia. At the moment, the entire resort staff was running around in chaos and trying to search the area for my daughter. I spoke with local authorities. They tried to make it sound like she had gone to the beach or was just wandering around, but I knew that was the best-case scenario. First of all, Olivia wouldn't do this. I explained to her how important it was not to leave the room without me. Moreover, why would she use a wig and pillows to make it appear to the casual observer that she was still in her bed? It didn't make any sense. Listen, we'll find her. She's probably wandering around the resort. Yes, I know what the fine is. I can return the money. Great. I'll take care of that. Michael ended the phone conversation. Something about the end of his call bothered me, but I was too preoccupied with finding Olivia to worry about it. Of course, I have no way of contacting Andrew. I arranged everything so that he could not contact me, and we would not be able to contact him. Of course, I could use the phone in the room, but how can I tell my future ex-husband that I took his daughter to another country and lost her? Besides, how can he help? After all, he is just the owner of a small business without much income. Michael tried to persuade me to dress up for my next appearance. I was too upset by the kidnapping of my daughter to be interested in it. I understand your feelings. However, we are here, and we need to eat. Everyone is doing everything they can to find her. It won't be any good if she comes back and you're too crazy to help her. In addition, they have my mobile phone number. They will call me and tell me any news. Michael finally talked me into getting dressed for dinner. We sat down at a table in the bar waiting for our reservation in the restaurant. Julio joined us and said that everyone he knew was looking for Olivia. Michael went to the bar to order us drinks and returned with 3 glasses. A white glass for me. Glasses with amber liquid for myself and Julio. It's strange, but after drinking wine I began to feel much calmer. After the second glass, I completely relaxed. Dinner, as always, was great. Afterwards, I felt very refreshed, and Michael invited me to the club to dance one more evening. As soon as the car stopped, I opened the door and ran into the house. Dad sat in his chair and sipped bourbon. When he saw me, his face seemed to light up, but then became gloomy. "Dad, what happened? Why am I here? What's happening?" I asked. He hugged me and held me tightly for several minutes. I felt his body trembling and heard his sobs. Not knowing what else to do, I just hugged him as tightly as I could. Eventually, he loosened his grip and I pulled away from him and sat down on the sofa next to his chair. "Dad?" I asked. "What's happening?" "Baby," he began. "Things are happening that you are too young to understand now. I'll leave a letter for you that you can open later. Much later, when you're old enough to understand what's going on. However, there is something you should know about." After that, my dad told me about how my mom took me away to prevent my dad from seeing me for the next month while she filed the divorce papers. He said she was going to take me away from him and not let me see him anymore. He said he brought me here because he needed to see me again, and where I was in danger. He said that I would live with him for the next week, and after that, I would move to my uncle's house. I asked why I couldn't stay with him, but he just said that I would understand everything later. I hugged him and cried on his shoulder. I started to slowly wake up. I felt that something was wrong, but my head was foggy. I remembered that Michael and I went to dinner and then to the club. This seemed strange to me because I wanted to stay in the room in case I heard any news about Olivia. I drank a couple glasses of wine, but not enough to get really drunk. I carefully opened my eyes. This was not my hotel room. My room was luxurious with a huge double bed, very luxurious. And here is a sparse room with a single bare light bulb in the center. Instead of a beautiful double bed with luxurious sheets and blankets, I was lying on a small single bed with no sheets or blankets. That's when I noticed that my wrists were cuffed above my head and my ankles were chained to the foot of the bed. Besides, I'm completely naked. I screamed in horror. A few minutes later, the door to the room opened. Julio came in, followed by Michael. "Michael, what's going on? Why am I chained here to this bed? I asked. Julio replied, "Unfortunately for you, Michael was unable to fulfill his contract. He was supposed to hand over your daughter to us so we could sell her into slavery. Somehow she disappeared. To make up for the damage, he returned half of the deposit we paid him and gave you to us." "Michael?" I asked. "Nothing personal, just business," he replied. "But I thought you loved me. Because of you, I am divorcing my husband." "Well, yes. I mean, we'd have a few fun years before I'd get tired of you. I mean, the money I would get from selling your daughter would last for several years. Unfortunately, her disappearance meant I needed to get the best deal I could. And unfortunately for you, part of the deal had to be you. I will miss sex with you. But there are many other women in the world who also have little daughters." With these words, he turned and left. After he left, my life became hell. Olivia was sleeping in her room. The mental and physical exhaustion of the past few days had caught up with her, from being taken to a foreign country, from wondering what was going on and worrying about her dad, from the sleeping pills she was given so that her mom and this strange man could party all night, from being rescued and then knowing what they planned to do with her. All this is beyond the power of any person, especially a child. On top of that, she learned what her mother had done to her father, taking her away from him when he was dying. She began to sob, realizing that he would die before they returned from the trip. She was then even more shocked when she was told that Michael was actually planning to sell her into slavery, and she would never return from the trip. I was sitting at my desk in my home office, contemplating my final instructions in the event of my death, when the phone rang. Looking at the caller ID, I saw that the private detective I had assigned to follow my wife was calling. "Yes," I answered. "We are making progress. We assumed that this could happen, and therefore we took everything into account. It will take us a couple of days to implement it, but how it will happen and whether it will happen at all is up to you to decide," he said. "What's happening?" I asked. "Since Olivia disappeared before she was handed over to the merchants, they decided to take your wife instead. She won't bring as much as your daughter could, but she will still fetch a good price. She was kidnapped last night. We managed to track her to a complex located 10 miles from the city. It is guarded, but is not a fortress. One of my operatives is hidden outside the complex and is conducting surveillance." "What about Michael?" I asked. "He seems to be aware of the matter. We caught snippets of conversation from their room before she was kidnapped, and it appears that because of the loss of Olivia, he had to return some of the money and give them to your wife. This was done to save his own skin and also to remain profitable." "Can you get her out?" "Yes, but it will take a couple of days and it will be bloody. My sources say she will go through hell until we can save her." "Do it. I hate her, but my daughter will never forgive me if she finds out that I could have saved her and didn't." "And Michael? Don't waste your time and energy on him. Even if it can be pulled out just as easily at the same time, do not lift even one finger for it. You understand that when your wife is saved, they will take it out on him. If he was very lucky, he would only be tortured for a couple of days before he was killed. The boomerang effect, isn't it? All clear." The call was interrupted. After 3 days of hell, I was dragged back to my cell. Michael was waiting for me there. "I just came in to say goodbye. You were a great lover, but business is business. It's either you or me. If I had let you go, they would have taken me. In this case, I would be lucky if they just killed me," he explained. "How can you do this to others?" I asked. "Do you have no conscience at all?" He just laughed. "Actually, no. Plus, I make a ton of money from it." Suddenly, we heard a noise in the corridor, lots of screaming and even a few shots. Before we had time to think what was happening, 4 large men in black tactical suits and masks burst through the door with machine guns drawn. "What is your name?" commanded a rough voice. "Ann Connors," I answered. "Michael Simpson," Michael answered. He pointed at Michael and ordered, "You, take off your clothes." Pointing at me, he added, "You put on his shirt and underpants." "What the fuck?" Michael shouted. "She is naked and cannot come with us without being dressed." "And what about me?" And you will stay here, and hurry up, otherwise we will have to remove them from your corpse." The big man emphasized this by putting the muzzle of a gun to Michael's head. Within moments, I was wearing Michael's shirt. He got his panties dirty, so I threw them away. As I was escorted through the complex, I noticed about a dozen other men dressed in black, escorting several women to several black SUVs. I'm guessing the drivers were NASCAR drivers because they were going faster than I thought was safe on those roads. We arrived at an abandoned airport, where we were loaded into an old plane. As soon as the plane took off, I was handed a glass of amber liquid. I saw a few guys had one and were drinking it, so I figured it was safe. A sip showed that this was a very good bourbon. From initial fatigue, adrenaline, and alcohol, I fell asleep. Epilogue. Olive's mom was taken to a private medical clinic. She lay there for several weeks, recovering from her experience. I visited her several times. She always asked about Dad, and I refused to tell her anything. She was upset that he didn't visit her at all. I asked her what she expected after what she did to him. At first, she was relieved that I was safe because she didn't know what happened to me, and she was shocked when I told her that Dad had found out about Michael's plans for me and sent people to save me. When Mom was finally discharged from the clinic, she asked me to take her to Dad. "Honey, this is a cemetery. Why are we here?" she asked. "Daddy's here," I answered. "What do you mean?" "Dad wanted to tell you about this in the evening when he returned home. He had just returned from the doctor's office. He had a very aggressive and inoperable brain tumor. He was actually dying. His funeral took place 3 days ago." My God, I thought he was just playing to the crowd. After Mom cried a little over Dad's grave, I asked the driver to take us to his lawyer's office. The shocks for Mom continued. During the reading of her father's will, she learned how rich he really was. He left $10 million to his brother. True, he left my mother a lifetime allowance of $5,000 a month. It was placed in a trust fund, which earned certain interest. Monthly payments are made from accrued interest. He put the rest in a trust fund for me that his brother would manage. I could access it for college and some other purposes. I will only get full access after I turn 30. When Mom found out the true amount of the trust fund, she fainted. The other problem was that my Uncle Jason and Aunt Kate were appointed as my guardians until I turned 18 and finished school. Mom began to rage about this until the lawyer showed her all the evidence that would be presented to the court to show her as an unfit mother. He also detailed that much of this information could be taken to court, and she could be sent to prison for several years. Mom signed the papers resignedly. Uncle Jace and Aunt Kate moved into our house. They were renting anyway, and it allowed me to continue studying at the school I was already going to. Mom moved to a small 2-room apartment. This way I could stay with her overnight when I visited her. Yes, I was still angry at her for what she did, but she was still my mom. I continued to study, eventually graduating with honors and going to college. I went to law school and became an attorney. After gaining control of my trust funds, I began working for nonprofit organizations helping victims of human trafficking. Julio tried to contact me several times. He also contacted his mother. I told Uncle Jace about this. I never heard anything more about him. A few years later, I learned that one night, several large men in black tactical suits came to see him. Mom actually saw a psychologist about the trauma she had experienced. She got a job in retail at one of the large department stores. She doesn't date, but she has a few friends with benefits that she dates. One of them is even a woman. She never spoke to me about what she went through during those terrible days, but she remembers Mei Ling and several other women held in this complex with fondness. Strange. In general, that's all. Yes, Mom screwed up, but she was also a victim. She was very badly burned for her actions, but I feel some compassion for her. She will survive and regret her decisions, but she will never be as rich as she expected. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.